Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. I just want to quickly say thank you for all the support as we have managed to make it into the YouTube partnership program. We now have memberships available and I will talk about those more at the end of the video just so we can get into things and I don't waste too much of your time. As Halloween has just passed at the time of this video coming out, we are due for another garbage day. And I thought since I'm in the spooky season at the time of recording, why not revisit Dead Island? A game that had arguably one of the greatest gaming trailers ever made, only to release and have the game be pretty much the complete opposite of what we expected, and it went on to upset a lot of the gaming public with good reason, as upon the game's actual release it was met with a complete lack of enthusiasm as it had its fair share of problems. From the voice acting, glitches, performance and a myriad of other issues, it went on to be considered a game of all time and a giant missed opportunity. So is Dead Island really a failure, or has time made it better? Since the original release, it has seen an updated version known as the Definitive Edition come out, and that is the version I'm playing for today's video, as you can no longer buy the original release, as it's been removed from storefronts. Starting out with the good, Dead Island is still one hell of a looker, even if some of the character models are definitely a little bit dated, especially the animations, but the overall environments look really damn impressive. The only downside that I really ran into was the occasional low texture load distance, and some spots where the lighting was a little bit too bright, but beyond that, that's pretty much the only issues I ran into with it. Some of the locales that you get to visit, especially those heavy in vegetation, are truly immersive and extremely well done. Add that with the ambient sounds and you have something that is actually kind of special. It makes things a truly believable world, at least when it comes to the presentation aspect. The game's OST is also a pretty big plus in my book. It's a lot less overstated than a lot of other soundtracks, as Dead Island's music looks to create atmosphere and drive the adrenaline when getting chased rather than all the time. And it's something they would actually implement into Dying Light as well. Another massive plus is the weapon variety. From blunt weapons, blades, pistols, shotguns, rifles, Dead Island lets you play how you want. Blunt weapons aren't necessarily as deadly, but they can cripple zombies. Blades are able to absolutely decimate pretty much anything, and guns let you keep your distance. As a nice addition though, you can also throw your melee weapons at zombies if you need to slow them down or try for that instant kill. You aren't guaranteed to always hit, so be careful when you do throw, because you do risk losing your weapon and it's a nice risk reward system. If you don't have a weapon, you can use the game's melee system, which consists of punching and kicks at the cost of stamina. Now while getting the footage, I actually played using the one punch mode that you can select at the start. It is a little bit silly and it does make the game a lot easier, but there is a reason why I played with it, and that's because I've actually played the game multiple times in the past without it, and the experience is still pretty much the same, albeit a lot easier because you don't need to worry as much about your health since you can just punch the shit out of a zombie and send it flying. Now it's a fun mode and it is a bit silly and it's just an addition, it's not something you have to use. So if you just play regularly, the combat itself is still actually pretty solid in action. It's a nice addition to have, but it isn't necessary to have fun. The game also allows you to unlock blueprints to modify your weapons, having a little makeshift crafting system. Now it's no Dead Rising, but it's perfectly functional and you can add elemental attacks to your weapons, making them a lot stronger in the long run. Where this does fall down a little bit though is the fact that the weapons have levels themselves, meaning after a certain point they're not going to be useful anymore, making you kind of leave it till the late game in order to really interact with this system unless you are struggling. The final main good point to me is the enemy variety, and even though it's a little bit cliche when it comes to a zombie game by today's standards, since we have walkers, sprinters, thugs which are our big tall ones, rams that charge at you, floaters that spit bile, suiciders who get to live my dream, I mean they blow themselves up instantly and killing you if you're too close, and butchers who are basically the most unique zombie of this game. They pretty much just want to do kung fu and kick your ass, making them pretty interesting. We also eventually end up fighting a variety of different humans, but they all use guns and basically have the same AI. And this enemy variety really adds a strong point to Dead Island as they're introduced quite gradually. Never so slow that it takes too long to meet anyone new, but never so fast that you feel overwhelmed and like it's hard to keep up with what's happening. It keeps the combat fresh throughout the entire experience, and it's about as good as you could ask for. Moving into the just okay parts, the first thing that's going to come to mind when talking about Dead Island is going to be the game's animations. And although certain things are animated quite well, such as the zombies, a lot of the talking NPCs just look pretty damn rough. Their mouths will move, as well as a little bit of jaw movement, but you're not really seeing anything from the eyes and above, making everything feel expressionless and almost like it has an uncanny valley feel to it. I would also put the game's story, lore, and mission variety here, and although they're not outright awful, the story is fairly lacking in any real depth, relying more on the player to drive things forward, more so than giving you a reason to do it. Also, the different acts throughout the game just don't feel really interconnected all that well, and even though yes, it's all towards getting you off the island, it doesn't feel like your character is actually impacting the world that you're in. Another okay point is the 4 playable characters, even though there is a bonus one, but functionally they're all pretty much the same, especially by the end of the game. Early on you can notice those differences, but by the late game they're all going to play basically identically. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the leveling up system just could have done a little bit more to help differentiate them. Add this with the lack of mission variety and you have a game that isn't necessarily worth replaying. I could definitely see you playing it again with co-op for sure, but that's more just because it's co-op. Playing with a friend can definitely make just about any game fun. Even the worst parts, like Dead Island's worst part as we move into the bad, and that is its lack of focus. 1 second you've got a pretty serious game where they've got NPCs telling you gut-wrenching experiences and stories, trying to get you to help them, only to have your character respond with, "I can do that," or just saying something that doesn't even relate. You'll also see that a lot of the combat, weapons, and just general design allows for silly goofiness to happen. This goes to what I mentioned earlier about playing in the one punch mode, because this is where they show, yes, we understand Dead Island should probably be more goofy, and I agree with that. If the game had just embraced this from the beginning and went down the Dead Rising route, I think we would have had something a little bit better and a little bit more coherent. The other major issue I have with the game is overall its movement, and it's perfectly functional, yes, and it's not the worst of any game I've ever played, but it feels almost too momentum based for its own good. Going back and forth, no worries, but as soon as you need to go left and right, it feels like your character is almost a tank. And considering they want you to run away from hordes in certain situations, it makes escaping nearly impossible, or at least feels that way. We don't have a slide when we run, and I can understand this is an older game, not every game is going to have that mechanic, but I think an updated version should have added this in. Realistically, adding a few more parkour elements that they would do for future games would have been nice to have here, at least with the definitive edition, but given the fact it is an older game, I can give it a pass. Just understand it can be a little frustrating at points. Where Dead Island really separates itself from other games on the taking out the trash section are the parts that are so bad it's good, and that pretty much all boils down to the game's voice acting. It is so poorly directed, so poorly thought out, that it is worth listening to just for the laughs. Just look at the character Cinemoy. You would expect this guy, who is meant to be a mix of either Australian, New Zealand, or Pacific Islander, to sound like that. However, I don't understand what he sounds like. Just listen.
First off, we need an access card to get past the security gate. Mine's in my room. With all the commotion, I forgot to take it with. It's in Bungalow 11, by the pools.
Now, without looking it up, can you tell me who that voice actor is? Because it's Steve Blum, the voice of Spike from Cowboy Bebop, yet they had him sounding like this. The talent behind this game was incredible, and some characters are actually quite well voiced. However, as soon as they were asked to do an accent, it just did not hit the way it should have. It's a game worth experiencing, especially with friends, if not at least to watch the cutscenes so you can hear these voices. Just don't expect a Last of Us experience and understand the game has its issues. Expect something goofy, and I think you can have a lot of fun. If you're going to play solo, play with the one punch mode, it just makes the entire experience more enjoyable. However, if you do look closely though, you can see the skeleton of what would become Techland's magnum opus and arguably the greatest ever zombie game, Dying Light, within the bones of Dead Island. Just understand it's going to be almost the beta version of that. Maybe the alpha. The horror itself in a horror game is pretty much played off for laughs, and honestly, it's for the best. The game understands when it's being goofy, it's at its strongest, and I just wish the entire design philosophy was that. You can definitely have fun with it, and I enjoyed my time. However, I would definitely recommend, if you want to play it, picking it up on sale for as cheap as possible, because it just isn't worth full price. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladettes, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this look back at Dead Island that was definitely more enjoyable in a B-grade horror movie way than I expected it to be upon replaying it. As mentioned at the start of the video, you can now support the channel by memberships. Now, I've only got 2 tiers, and these 2 tiers have the same perks. Basically, just pick the cheapest one. You do not have to go the more expensive one. It's just there for anyone who wishes to support that little bit extra. So if you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button. If you want to go that extra step, you can hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to go that extra mile, you can either support me on Ko-fi or YouTube memberships and be like these lovely people here. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.